This is Fit to Succeed in partnership with NordicFitnessEducation.com with hosts Ben Pratt.
What about post-sleep routines? Let's not focus on pre-sleep. Let's look about post. Let's look about recovery moments every 90 minutes. Let's look at how we can grab little 20-minute moments here, there. Look at how we can balance when we do go to sleep in that deeper sleep stage.
Welcome to this episode of the Fit to Succeed show. Today we are going to be exploring the subject of sleep, and I'm really pleased to have with me a sleep coach that has become renowned for his work within the sporting world. He has more than 2 decades of experience in this field, and he helped us perhaps maybe over a year ago when we created the Sleep Recovery Specialist course. He was one of the experts within that course and was very generous with his time. And so today, I'm really pleased to welcome him to the podcast so that we can discuss sleep in a way that will benefit and help all of the listeners. So Nick Littlehales, the elite sports sleep coach, welcome to the Fit to Succeed podcast.
Nice to be with you again, Ben.
Excellent. It's great to have you actually come on our podcast show this time. Now, you are the author of a book called Sleep, The Myth of 8 Hours, The Power of Naps, and The New Plan to Recharge Your Body and Mind, which is, I suppose, a descriptive subtitle there. And today we wanted to kind of explore some of those issues in the podcast interview, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
Now, let's start off, if we can, giving some context to your background, if we could. What was it that motivated you to focus your professional career on sleep and supporting athletes in their endeavors in sporting performance?
I have no idea, Ben. It's a bit of a combination of a journey. You know, I love sport. As a teenager, I tried to get into it. I did a bit of professional stuff. Ended up getting married, moved into the furniture industry. We're talking way back in the early 80s. Mm-hmm. So I've always had a little bit of that sport thing going on in the background. I worked for a big company, became their international sales and marketing director. They were involved with sleeping comfort products. It was an international company. Mm-hmm. So I was wandering around studying sleep, doing all sorts of things, making products, being part of sleep councils, working with professors of sleep, things like that. And basically got into a sort of midlife crisis in my early 40s, been doing all this corporate stuff, you know, building up families, earning the 6 figures, driving nice cars, flying everywhere, doing lots of innovative things. But I realized that the sleep industry was just 2 parts. Mm-hmm. You've got the clinical side, which just focuses on disorders and specifics. You know, this was back in the mid-90s. Mm-hmm. And then you've got the sleeping industry, which is pretty much mattresses and pillows and bedding. So everybody was taking sleep for granted. There was no sort of educational process in place. It's not a performance criteria. And I'd learned a lot about the sort of contradictions. So working with professors of sleep, they would be researching and looking at the clinical aspects of sleep, but they had no approach themselves. Mm-hmm. So they just approach sleep just like I did or anybody did, you know. So I think it was just a moment in time. I just happened to be, my UK office was in Oldham, Manchester. I just happened to be on my 12-month contract to leave it. So I think the first point of interest came, Ben, when the local football team, Oldham Athletic, to where the UK factory was, asked if we would sponsor their shirts as football. Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I just thought, well, that's a bit weird. You know, you're talking, you know, 96, 97 sort of time. Things are a lot different these days. But it was something I thought I would do it because most of the workforce in the factory liked their local club and all that sort of stuff. But we're not talking elite sport here. And mm-hmm. But what happened is it started some dialogue with the football club. And then I was getting invited along to sort of like sponsorship and football evenings. And what I wasn't aware of at the time, but the local football club, Manchester United, to Oldham, Manchester, happened to have a breeding ground of local teams like Bury and Oldham, where they would bring in, you know, UK British players.
Mhm.
So I just found myself having a conversation with Alex Ferguson, the manager of Manchester United.
As you do.
And
As you do.
well, I was just the guy who writes the check out for the sponsorship for the shirts, you know. But I suppose it was at that particular point where I sort of started to ask questions. You know, do you do anything about recovery or sleep or the products the players sleep on? Because that was really my competence.
Mhm.
And so we started some dialogue, and the physio at the football club at the time, a guy called Dave Fever, became a little bit interested. And because my competence was in the area of products in the main, because we were a product manufacturer and I was a director of that company, we just decided together that we would have a look at a particular player's problems with lower back issues and things, of whether what they were sleeping on could improve their back problems. And that was away from the club. So this is the first time they'd looked at something about away from the club rather than concentrating at it. And we did a few things. Things changed. We started more conversations. I was able to use my take on what sleep meant and all of these little myths and misunderstandings surrounding it. And because although all the people at the club were sleepers, because we're all humans, they were not part of the sleep industry. So I think we just kept discussing things. My interest, obviously, you know, I've got an elite set of, you know, physios and coaches, sort of we're talking. And I suppose the interest of a long time ago when I was in sports, like maybe this is my opportunity to actually get involved with sport. But actually, I'm doing it with something that they wouldn't normally associate with sport. And in a very quick set of circumstances, suddenly I was talking to groups of players. We were looking at pre-season double-up training and using sort of napping. Then we were looking at chronotyping. Then we were looking with the England squad. Then we were looking at Arsenal Football Club. And suddenly it just went, wow, I don't know actually what I'm doing. I'm trying to sort of make it up as I'm being asked. So maybe there is a role as a sleep coach in sport. But, you know, it sounds a little bit it wasn't a thing I sat down and chose to do. It was just a combination of things that, like most things in life, you know, it's, I've always believed that there was a different approach to this subject, but within my industry, I was sort of, you know, straitjacketed from being able to explore it in the way I would, because I'd be classed as a bit of a maverick, a bit of a controversial, a bit of don't change the norm, Nick. Otherwise they'll find out, sort of thing, you know.
Well, I mean, I thank you.
That's it, Ben. You know.
I thank you for that, because obviously 30 odd years ago, you pioneered something that at the time nobody in sport or in fitness was really looking at, yet it was so integral to health. And, you know, we fast forward, 20, 30 years to where we are now. And it's almost become to that point where we know without doubt that sleep has a significant impact upon health. It has a significant impact upon sporting performance and how people feel. It has a significant impact on injury rate, muscle growth. There's so many areas that we know that sleep has an impact on if we get it right, or negatively if we get it wrong. So after 2 decades now of working in that field,
I'll tell you what.
Oh, go ahead.
I tell you, I wished I'd known that,
right,
you know, along that journey, because it's a weird journey that along that route, it's only been certain organizations, certain individuals that have kept me, you know, financially alive along that process. How many people have told me to just give that up? Forget it. It's a waste of time, you know? So it's always nice in hindsight to look back and go, wow, I'm so glad I didn't stop then or then or then. But the challenge for most of us is to sit down and say, you know, when is the timing going to be right for something to happen? We have no idea. So I think, you know, whatever makes you tick, whatever you want to try and achieve, you just have to keep trying and trying and trying and trying.
Indeed.
With no rules.
And it shows how important that is now, Nick, especially, you've published this great book on sleep. And, I believe it's been, is it 13 or 14 languages it's now been translated into, because there's a demand for people to know how to improve their sleep.
I think, because it's sort of a non-academic, I'm not an intelligence, I've been studying it. It's a non-clinical approach that when I was asked to write it, I thought that would be the end of me, because the sort of academic and clinical world would just, rip it to bits. Where is the proof? Where is this?
Mm-hmm.
How can this guy write about a subject when he's not even a sleep expert or doctor of sleep or whatever?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And you also think that when you expose what you've been doing hidden away inside of the world of sport, nobody knows what you're doing really. It's all about referral. You're not really overexposing yourself. You're just working with individuals and making little steps and stuff like that. But then to actually put it out there, for everybody, is actually, this is what I do, was a big challenge.
Sure.
And it makes you reflect on that whole journey, which a lot of it you've forgotten about. You didn't really realize that was a moment in time, or that was a moment in time. It's only when you're asked to reflect on it. So, well, yeah, because that happened, then that happened, then that happened. And I think when it came out, I was sort of hiding away, locked in a room going, let's just wait for the backlash. But again, the publishers were big publishers, Penguin Random House. And they gave me every confidence, because they do their due diligence on you. They don't publish things that are going to make waves in the system. They have to be very careful. So they gave me all the confidence that the content of the book would be of some value. And from that particular point, you sort of think, well, a few people will read it and then it'll just go off up into the shelves where the sleep books are, where nobody goes. But even today, even this month, it's being published in 2 new countries.
Oh, wow.
Well,
congratulations.
One is in the Czech Republic. So that's a new publication since 2016. So it's actually being published in new countries even now. And the other one is in Arabic, which covers a large part of the world, as the Arabic speaking world. So it's kind of like, so there's publishers go, we still want to publish that book, even though it's been around since 2016. So as you say, it's 14 languages, and it's certainly not centric to any sort of Western or postcode or zip code area of this planet. Everybody from China, Japan, all across Europe, US, it's a big old subject.
Yeah, it certainly is. And I know when I was doing the research for the sleep recovery course that we have, that was a challenge as to where do you stop? There is so much research now, but as you perhaps indicated 30 years ago, that was not so easy to find because we didn't have the internet. You'd have had to have gone to a library, and it probably would have been difficult to get hold of the research that was published.
That's what I did, Bo. That's what I did, this is what happened. If you wanted to find something out, you went to the library, or you read a newspaper, or somebody told you, or you read a book. That fascinating change over the last 2 decades is, every generation has a challenge, don't they, Ben? But within that period of time, it's just unfathomable to even sit back and think, wow. And it's not stopping, is it? So
yeah, absolutely. Now, after all of that experience over the last 2 decades, then, Nick, why do you believe now, knowing what you've learned and experienced over the last 2 decades, why do you believe that sleep is such an integral part of modern day sporting performance?
We've very, very quickly moved into what I classify as non-human everyday approaches. And that is, we're quite happy just to keep removing all the little recovery opportunities we have. They were unplanned up until the late 90s. They were not planned, but they were there because, I had to walk to the library. And that was a recovery moment, walking to the library, So we've been constantly just moving along this thing, fast-paced. We've got the whole sort of 24/7 global world looking down on it and shifting around. So what you've seen is that the ability for any athlete or organization, and you hear it all the time on TV, whether it's Jurgen Klopp or Pep Guardiola or Olympic committees or whatever it is you're just pushing humans too far, and we tend to try to deal with it almost when it's too late. So it's a bit like going to the edge of the cliff and going, wow, we need to turn around and go back a bit before we go, And I think the reason why sleep, there's two sides to the sleep bit. One, it's the uninvestigated health pillar alongside exercise and nutrition. So because it's been investigated apart from high level research, then everybody's trying to deep dive into that area, whether it's to make money or to try and educate and make people aware. But I think the fascinating thing, even in elite sports, they know so much about so much. They've been using technology and stuff for a long, long time, but very rarely do they actually look at the impacts on the human being as far as recovery is concerned.
Okay. Indeed.
So they've obviously got things in place, but it is a little bit like go to bed, I'll see you in the morning type of approach, So it's very much left to you as an individual device. And I think the big change with the clients I work with in individuals is we don't focus on what happens while you're asleep, right? Because you're out of control, right? You're out of control. Your brain's in charge now, okay? So the ability to recover mentally and physically is all about what you do from the point of wake throughout any 24 rolling process, understanding that sort of process, so that as you meet every sort of shift and change in your everyday and period, we've got a new manager in, so I'll do this. We've got this, I've got married. I wasn't married before. Now we're having a child. Oh, I'm going to do this now. So it's just defining their approach so that really whatever challenge comes along, and sometimes they can be very simple, tiny little things that you don't think are a challenge, is that you've got a subconscious way of helping your brain recover because you're doing it while you're awake.
Yeah.
Right? You've got a sleep routine while you're awake. You've got a recovery routine while you're awake, so that when you do present yourself to go to sleep, then you've done everything you can to sort of release it. But also, without making this a big, it's also knowing when sleep is going to be difficult.
Right.
And so not try to do it, not force it, addictive behavior, sleeping tablets, that sort of thing. Is so you know that if that's happened, then maybe you should do some other things. If that's about to happen, you should do this. And it really empowers an elite athlete and an organization to ensure that along any particular journey to an Olympic final, to a World Championships or a Champions League or whatever it is along that journey, it's always about having more consistent, sustainable levels of mental and physical recovery, not about the highs and the lows.
Indeed. Now, it was interesting. One of the things you said that made me, it threw my thoughts back to when I had the opportunity to go to, I won't say the sport, but I went to stay for a night in one of the sporting institutions' accommodation for their athletes. And this was a national level place. And interestingly, they treated this place, which you would have thought would have been separate to regular guests. They treated it like a hotel. So they had certain rooms that were for the athletes, and then everybody else could book a room. So I booked a room and stayed at this place, and it was very clear that it was not really set up to optimize the sleep environment. The beds were not very comfortable. The doors certainly were not soundproof. You could hear people both above and going down the corridor. There were so many things that would have made it a difficult place to sleep, and these athletes often would come there for 3, 4, or 5 days every week. And they would train all day long. And then they would have to stay in this accommodation place. And it was quite clear to me that they had not considered lots of aspects that would have improved athletic performance by maximizing recovery.
Yeah. Well, I think something I, try to put across to everybody, as human beings, we are naturally designed to sleep anywhere, on anything, anytime, in any way. We have to. We have different time zones. We have different circadian rhythms. We have the north and southern hemispheres. We have hot and cold. We have all sorts of stuff. And we quite happily, go camping, sleep on sofas, chairs, bunk beds, this, that. So it's more to do with your understanding about how you can recover, to try and not put too much emphasis on certain things that you would think would improve recovery that won't. So you can go the opposite direction to your facility by creating all of this fancy stuff. Well, how do you replicate that when you're in the Hilton Hotel in Tokyo, right?
That's a good point.
So I always try to, and you don't do it, do they? So I think the focus is like, we don't have any impact on their homes. We don't have any impact on the hotels. So when they build a facility for athletes, they take exactly the same approach.
Right.
And they chuck a bed in there. Well, it's a bed. Yeah, okay. It's just a bed, yeah. And we chuck that in there, we chuck that in there, and somebody's designed it, an architect. And but they're not doing it in any way, shape, or form. And I think if these environments were actually designed for, elite performers, anybody who's not an elite performer, and the population is growing in this area, we all go jogging, we all go to the gyms, we all do this. So it's not like it's a really unhealthy population and a very high healthy, but they're all generally going to hotels and going, I want good recovery because this is why I've come here to do this or to that. So gone are the days. So hotels, they are, but they have to sort of, if they set them up for an elite athlete, I'm happy to stay in that room as a non-elite athlete.
For sure.
Whereas what we've got is, we'll set that up for every sort of, anybody who comes in here. And we won't take no notice of all of those things because they're only staying for one night. So they'll be in, whatever, who cares, get out. So we have to change that whole process. But there are companies that are doing it. And there are certain sporting organizations. I'm working with one right now. We've done a lot of work over the last few years. So that is changing,
Good. It's good to hear. Now, I wonder if we could get into just a few of the details that you share in your book. One of those is Chronotype, and you refer to them as AMers or morning type people, or PMers or evening type people, and you even talk about the in-betweeners. I wonder if you could just explain to the listeners how someone's chronotype or preference might be able to be adjusted or adapted in and around planning exercise or a sports training session.
These are big subjects. But I think anybody who's from the clinical world or whatever, excuse my reaction to this question, but I'll keep it as I use it, talking to a lot of people. I always heard about owls and larks, which is the morning and nighttime bird. I became intrigued to find out, whether there was any reason why we were like that or we just made it up. Found out that in principle there's a little genetic twist, and that is our ability to produce melatonin and serotonin, which are two hormones triggered by light and diminished light and dark. And they're triggered by a little gland in our brain called the pineal gland. And basically, if you've got lots of light, your serotonin world, you're telling the brain to unsuppress everything, make you active, mood and motivation. Triggered by sunrise, daylight, because we're human beings and we used to sleep outside, and circadian rhythms and all that subject, it's all linked together. So what you find is if you put two people outside and they sleep outside and they're active outside, then the morning type, the AM, is that as soon as the sort of sun gets to the horizon and starts bringing this light in, and inside there you've got the energy light, blue light within the spectrum, is that basically I'm an AMer, Ben, as you probably know. I start reacting to this light really quickly. So I wake early and I'm hungry, I'm starving, I want to eat and all that sort of stuff. The PMer, it's like a 1 to 2 hour phase delay.
Right.
So the pineal gland's not quite getting it as quickly as mine. So it's sort of like I want to start at 6 o'clock, depending on sunrise, but they're more like 8 o'clock,
Right.
So you sort of go, oh, well, that's what's happening. Yeah. So can you camouflage it? Yeah, of course you can. Can you override it? Yes, of course you can. Can you ignore it? Of course you can. Can you change it? No, you can't.
Right.
No, you can't. If you underexpose yourself to light or overexpose yourself to light, or in any 24-hour period. And what I also got fascinated by was whenever I was working with any group, and I would just ask them, are you this type of person? They get it straight away with just a few questions. I mean, do you love the mornings? Do you love breakfast? I mean, are you a snoozer? No, as soon as I'm awake, I'm off and gone. I mean, I love the morning. Do you like the evenings and the nighttime? No, not so much.
Yeah.
No. PMers, you're like this, you know. You're hitting the snooze button and just dragging yourself somewhere. But in the evenings, you get this little buzz and you really like sort of doing podcasts at 12 o'clock and 1 o'clock. Yes, wow, isn't it? Okay, right then. When you ever do that, and this has been going on for quite a while, and there is some research around, I think there's probably more 60, 70% of any population who are nighttime chronotypes, but they live and operate in a morning chronotype world.
Right, because you have to get up for work and you have to go to school. That's what you're getting at.
Yeah, so it's kind of like the AM has decided we start the day at the sunrise. Well, the sun's coming up, fine. So that we can't really change that. So it makes a lot of logical sense to start the day as the light appears. But we didn't realize that there was another bunch of human beings who got this little genetic twist, which means they don't become that active just because of the sun's risen up. So I think some of the things you look at in the modern world, you know, you've got people working multi-schedules, different schedules, not just night shifters. You've got Amazon workers, you've got this, you've got that. You've got people over a 7-10 day period working 2 days of that, 2 days of that, 2 days of that, 2 days of that.
Yeah, shifts change.
Oh, so you've got loads of things going on there. And when an organization, when they spend so much money, whether it's sport or corporate, whatever, they spend so much money, even in hospitals, they spend so much money on maybe well-being this and well-being that and everything else. And if they only reflected on the chronotypes of the people within the organization, they can start to make little considered changes. And that's what we see in a lot of the sort of newer companies, is that if you take that on board, then when people do things and why, can have an enormous impact on productivity, absenteeism, just how healthy and well that person is, because they're not being challenged by something that's not right. You see a decrease in addictive behaviors, right?
Really?
Going into sleeping tablets, over caffeinating, all that other stuff that goes on. There's more, you know, starting to take melatonin supplements, you know, or insomnia. You see that actually if you are going through your 24-hour process in a way that's more in harmony with the natural circadian rhythms of the day, right? You're more synchronized with that process, right? In your own little world, is that suddenly you get this reaction of, this has been a paradigm shift to my everyday approach, because these subtle little changes has had an enormous impact on my emotional state, how I deal with things, how I react to things, my eating habits, my exercising habits, my social experiences. And also, I don't get worried that I like to do things at 2 o'clock in the morning and worry about I'm the only person who's awake.
Right.
I actually know it's natural for me to wake at around 2 o'clock in the morning and be quite awake, as if it's looked like this and looks like that, which is a different conversation. But you know what I'm on about.
Yeah.
So in sport, once they start that chronotype conversation, it starts to take them down the whole journey of, wow, we need to do that now. What about post-sleep routines? Let's not focus on pre-sleep. Let's look about post. Let's look about recovery moments every 90 minutes. Let's look at how we can grab little 20-minute moments here, there. Look at how we can balance when we do go to sleep and that deeper sleep stage. You know, I'm just rattling things off because it starts a conversation that they've never had before.
Something that really came to my mind as you were talking through that was, it made me think about the classic team sport environment. You know, you must have worked with some of those football teams or other teams that have a crowd of people who are all different chronotypes, yet they have to report for training at a similar time. They have to attend a game at a similar time. Many of those games nowadays are late in the evenings and potentially affects their sleep. How do you manage that chronotype question in relation to that?
I think once the conversation starts, you sort of go, well, that's the picture in front of us. And it's either going to be it's not that bad, or it really is, we're definitely nighttime chronotype, higher percentage within our organization.
Right.
And yet the person who's running it is a morning chronotype or a PM chronotype. You've then got things like parents and girlfriends and partners and children, so you've got inside the core of that organization, you've got all these other outside influences. So you sort of go, oh, we need to find out about them as well. But
All right.
the general thing is what you do is you just start the process and you just go, right, this is what our schedule looks like. We can now identify the weak spots where we're putting ourselves under more pressure than others because of our chronotype mix.
Mm-hmm.
So we can then use light therapy tools, 10,000 lux, blue light tools to make sure that we're providing the right levels of light to the right chronotypes at the right time. So they're all sat in the same room, but I'm sat next to a lamp and they're not, sort of thing. I've got a lamp at home to get me started. What do I do between games? And it's just a nice little process of when we change the bulbs in the training facility, we change them to daylight bulbs, not just go and buy some from down the shop or whatever.
Right.
When we're advising each individual, we're trying to use light therapy to balance things. We're trying to change our communication. So if we have a meeting in the morning, then all our PMers have to get involved with light. So they have to get up earlier. They can't just wait until they snooze it out. We all get up at the same time to be here for that. So the AMers, they're happy, okay?
Yep.
But the PMers need some help. So they need light. When we get to that environment, we definitely need the light up. The AMers are going to react to it fine, but the PMers need it big time. When we get, so we chop the day up into 4 phases. My little thing is my R90 technique and 7 key sleep recovery indicators. Well, we use that. If we chop the day up into 90-minute cycles from your natural chronotype wake time, not your occupational one, your natural chronotype wake time, creates a series of 16 timings. It also chops the day up into 4 phases. So we've got this start of the day till midday, and it's almost like 6 o'clock till 12 o'clock. Okay. Then you've got 12 o'clock till 6 p.m. Then you've got 6 p.m. till 12 a.m. Then you've got 12 p.m. into 6 a.m. Mm-hmm. So you're talking about, that's all about dark. This is about diminished light and dark. That's about 20, 30,000 lux in the first phase. The second phase is 20,000, 30 lux diminishing down to 10 to 5. Then we're under the floodlights. So we start to check light. We start to wander around going, how much light are we in? To try and get a relationship of how much time we're spending in different places. And once you start doing that, to just drop back, then you can start data collecting and making little shifts. So the communication process might be the boss says, in the room tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, 70% of my team, my coaches, are nighttime chronotypes. The other 30% are AMers like me. So we know this, but we can't change it. So everybody comes in at 9 o'clock. We've helped them with the light as much as we can. Mm-hmm. And I will put up there that the strategic position of what we're trying to do today is 1 + 1 = 2. Okay? Now I know that the AMers will get this. They'll just get it. Okay? 1 + 1 = 2. Yeah, we're off. 1 + 1 = 2. Off we go. What I know is that the other group, my PMers, they will look at me and go, yeah, 1 + 1 = 2. But as they leave the room and wander around, suddenly there's sort of nighttime chronotype. They've missed other little things.
Right.
It's only 1 + 1 = 2 when you've got 2 things that you can add together. Right? Mm-hmm. If you haven't got 2 things to add together, you don't have 2. Right? Mm-hmm. You've just got 1 or one or the other. So what they've done is miss the journey. Mm-hmm. So we send them a text.
All right.
We'll send them a text just after lunch when we know that they're sort of getting, and we just go, by the way, that means that. That's why 1 + 1 = 2.
Sure.
And they go, because I thought you said 1 - 1 sometimes might equal 2. You know? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm just exaggerating a point, but whether it's communications, just change it. Whether it's light, just make subtle changes. Everybody's aware of it, so we know the percentage mix, so we can do little things. And certainly what you can start to see that if you are able to make little shifts, like way back in the late 90s when Alex Ferguson wanted to double up pre-season training, first time ever, because they only trained in the morning.
Right.
And so a little bit like you were saying, say, if you were scoring out of 10, so certain players in morning training, when they're data collecting, which is quite limited then, but they were still collecting data, maybe you've got X percentage of players who are 8 or 9 out of 10 in their data collection, but there's others who are 6, 5, or 4. So the 6, 5, or 4s sit on the bench. They become replacements. They don't play so often. But the 8, 9, 10ers who are creating the right level, they get first team placements. Now then, you start looking at data in the afternoon.
Right.
So the 4, 5, and 6, became 8 and 9s in the afternoon.
They perform better because they're PMers, I see.
Yeah. So the 8 and the 9s became 7s and 6s. So it's only whenever you're looking at it, that journey, you suddenly start, and particularly, in any little group, they've all got partners or girlfriends and stuff like that, and you suddenly go, is your partner the same chronotype as you? And you go, yeah, I'm a PMer. She or he's a PMer.
Right.
Wow.
I encourage you to stay up.
Yeah. Or they go, well, no, my partner's an AMer and I'm a PMer. Do they drive you nuts? Yep. And it's wow, and then you can get very, if you have children, you suddenly start to spot the kids' chronotypes, and the ones rush downstairs fully dressed, uniform on, eating breakfast, ready to go. The other one, you're still bashing them on the head to get them out of the bread. Now if you know that that's probably a chronotype twist, then you can manage it rather than just shout at them. Yes. And make them do the same things as anybody else. So in another area, if you're the manager of a big club and you've got a series of players, like 30-odd, 40-odd players, then in your defense structure, where you've got left backs, right backs, central defense, this sort of stuff, is you want a nice mix of AM and PMer defensive players. Because you have to play at 12:30, 3 o'clock, 5:45, 7:45, 8 o'clock in Moscow, in Southampton, in Huddersfield, at Burnley, winter, summer, so
I'm with you. Having a mix would be beneficial potentially if they all had good.
Well, you kind of think, does it make a difference? But then, in my world in elite sport, the thickness of my finger would be the difference between somebody like Sir Chris Hoy winning a gold medal on a velodrome track. A Formula One driver that I work with, it's a thousandth of 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 a second, which is just unimaginable, but that's the difference. So if you sort of think, well, the difference just might be in the last 30 seconds of the extra 5 minutes added to the 90. It could be who takes a penalty at a certain point. It could be where you put a particular player at a particular time. It's like who you might put out. It's what you do in the background to protect them from those sort of, and in those real 1%ers marginal gains, you just go, it's 9:49. It's the Champions League final and we got a penalty and nothing's happening after this. Who's going to take it? Right? And if you've got loads of penalty takers, they're all brilliant, stats beyond it, but you just know that is the right space for that person, not the other one. So you just go, it's a bit of a risk, but you never know, So it really opens up a fantastic, and I can't wait for the next 5 years, because I think this one area is going to be we'll learn more about it. We'll define it better. Rather than me just generally talking about it like I have been today, which is a little bit all like chuck it out there and see what happens. But I think this area is going to be absolutely key for any company, any individual, any family, any child, any student, any pilot, any nurse or anything else, because it'll really change the dynamics of how we think. We're just human beings with bodily functions on a planet with the sun going around it. Nothing's changed. Nothing's likely to change in that sense, but everything else is just gone nuts.
Yeah, yeah. I couldn't help but think, we're coming to the end, unfortunately, but it's been a fascinating discussion on Chronotype, but I couldn't help but think that recently, I don't know how much of an athletics fan you are, but they had the World Athletics Championships in Doha. And for those who were in Doha, a lot of the races were done very, very late. You know, the sessions were starting typically around about 7 or 8 and sometimes running on to as late as midnight. And it was interesting to see, because as I was watching, I was thinking about how late it was, that there was those who did exceptionally well, you know, thinking, no, they're probably PMers. And then there were those who have done well in the past, but really struggled at that championships because they were having to perform late when perhaps they're more of an AMer. And some of those people I can think of were for perhaps hotter countries where it's perhaps brighter in the mornings. And so I just wonder how, you know, how much Chronotype plays into performance based on the time of day that an event or a championship or a game is actually played.
I think the real answer to that question, Ben, it's a great question, is rather than just saying, I wonder how many people were affected by it and what were all those changes, was actually to understand is that there were some challenges, but if that had been revealed some time ago, is revealing somebody's chronotype and managing that, their performance levels will go up, not down. Right. So even PMers going into Doha, if they're not looking at these things, then the impact will be far greater than, so they don't notice it because we just get up and push on and do it. We're at the peak of our athletic careers. We're going to win gold medals or silver medals at the biggest events, you know, so we're at peak performance. But the thing is that if you put yourself in a certain set of circumstances like Doha and just think you can go with it, then it's at those moments in times when just suddenly your legs ain't working.
Yeah.
And he's just like, I didn't understand that. But we've got lots of excuses for it, haven't we? But the people who organise, you can't sort of say that we can only have athletic events in certain countries at certain times.
For sure.
You know, we can't sort of say to Ben, well, it's all on catch-up, so watch it when you like. But all the athletes are going to run at the right times at the right place, but you can watch it when you want. No, they want people in the stadium. They want people to live streaming and pay for TV and all that sort of stuff. So they sort of go, they did it in Rio with the swimmers, you know. They're up in the morning at 3, 4 o'clock, you know, doing the lengths because that's always they do. And then they're doing finals and heats at 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah, which is completely the other end of the spectrum for them.
Yeah, and I think in talking about things like Tokyo for quite some time, I mean, obviously it's Olympic Games, so people talk about it for a long, long time. But as far as all of these things building, there is a lot of challenge around Tokyo. And all of those things around Doha and all things like that. I even heard the other day that they were thinking of cancelling daylight saving time.
Oh, really?
Right? In that part of the world.
Oh, right.
And then we've got this wonderful, you know, World Cup in one of the coolest air freshening countries in the world coming, you know, in Qatar. You know, it's like, you know. Yeah. So I think the good organizations just go, that's what's happening. We ain't going to change that, But how can we manage our team so that they can actually have their full potential when it's required, but their journey to that will be different to what is the norm.
Yeah.
Because of their chronotype.
Exactly. And they could look at the event, you know, they all know the times that they'll have to run probably months in advance. And they can go, this is when my performance is, and gradually adjust their normal routine towards being optimal at that time. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, and we did it. When I got involved with British Cycling and Team Sky, it was all about the aggregation of marginal gains. It's all these little bits. And it sort of goes, so you start to look, well, can I change that? Difficult. It's equipment, clothing, nutrition, things like that. So what could we concentrate on that might make a difference? And that might be human performance. It's actually the person on the bike.
Yeah.
So how can we get that engine, that person onto, then wrap it up in the equipment, then put it on the bike, let's do all of that, and then off it goes, right? So that's maybe where we can find a game.
Mm-hmm.
So you just sit there and ask yourself, I don't know how much sleep Usain Bolt has ever had in his life, from one night to the next. I don't know whether he got 6 hours, 7.25 hours, 4 hours here or whatever. I don't know how much REM sleep he's ever got. REM sleep, non-REM sleep, deep sleep, no idea.
Mm-hmm.
Neither is he, neither is his coach. What's his chronotype? I don't know. Right? So if you look at that and say, well, he could have gone faster, you know. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you certainly see a marathon runner, although it's staged, right, you still got to do it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you still got to run under 2 hours. You know, you can't, just because everybody's around there helping you, that doesn't mean that your physical form and mental form is going to make it. But you do sort of step. I think that was a good example. If you maybe tick a few more boxes, particularly in this area, you'd have no idea what you could achieve.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's the clever bit with these sort of things. It could take 2% off your absenteeism numbers, which costs company numbers. It could maybe people are a little bit more productive and happier. Mm-hmm. So people are smiling a little bit better. Add that one up.
Yeah, absolutely. So
I think these things it's going to be fascinating, and
it is, and there's no doubt. You know, listen to as you've talked today. You know, the potential for improvements in our life through sleep is definitely there. And I would really encourage the listeners to think about that in your own life, in your own health and your own fitness, you know, to really consider the potential for how sleep could impact you and your life and how it could impact your clients, without a doubt. Is there any final words you'd like to offer, Nick, before we wrap this one up?
Yeah, I think every time I speak, and have done for a long time, I say your perception of sleep, just put it to one side. Do not go off and try to think about sleep, right? Think about mental and physical recovery periods. Think about the human being. Think about the circadian rhythms. Tap it in your browser. And know there is a new generation out there who are redefining what this thing is called sleep. They've flicked it to one side and gone, I'm on 35 cycles a week. I do 7 short cycles, CRPs. So my sleep looks like 35 90-minute cycles, 3 CRPs. It's balanced over a 7-day period. I do not focus on 8 hours at night, never have done. I sleep in a polyphasic way. So it's just suddenly, if anybody you've just asked to think about their sleep, just remember, in my world, in your world, we sit down and we don't talk about sleep. Mm. We've got a new approach. So we're going to put those on 32 cycles. We're going to put those on 27 cycles. Or we've got nurses on 3 cycles and 4 cycles. We've got balances. We've got a different sort of approach. And that's, so anybody listening to this should walk away and go, you know, listen to it again, look at everything you do, and just think there is another way of doing this, and it could literally change your world. But if you want, you know, the courses that you offer, amazing. But also, you know, if we try to provide a toolkit of things from our website, sportsleepcoach.com. We like the idea of free content. We like to give as much away free that we charge for. So we're constantly trying to keep our abreast of everything that's going on, because it is quite challenging. You know, the office just gets stuff coming to it every day, whether it's trackers or eye masks or things that breathe or whatever. But I think we've got some nice introductory little things, you know, where people could read a book, or they could do a little course, listen to something, listen to this, just make those little early steps to get what you've asked them to do into process, and then they'll be fine.
Yeah, absolutely. And listeners, I'm going to connect you up on the show notes for this episode with obviously everything that Nick is doing on his website, and also his sleep products that he sells. And also there is a link on Nick's website to be able to get access to the Sleep Recovery Specialist course at a 20% discount. So I'll also include that. So please look out for that on the show notes. So thanks, Nick, for your time today. It's been a real pleasure talking with you and really getting into the nitty-gritty around Chronotype. Thanks so much.
Oh, we've only just started, Ben, but there you go. Thanks very much.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and share via social media. You can also rate the show on iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube. If you'd like to know more about us, then check out our range of online courses at www.nordicfitnesseducation.com.